So in honor of the 50th anniversary of the death of the Brazilian diplomat Luiz Martins de Souza Dantas, the Consulate General of Brazil in New York and Raoul Wallenberg Foundation hold this ceremony to remember and commemorate his heroic deeds. Moved by what he later called a Christian feeling of mercy, Souza Dantas, during the first 2 years of World War II, as the head of the Brazilian diplomatic mission to France, challenged Nazi occupation establishment, and while risking his own career, granted diplomatic visas to hundreds of people of the Jewish faith fleeing Nazi Europe. With his actions, he was able to save more than 800 lives from extermination. At a time when fear prevailed and even diplomats used to sell visas and accept all kinds of compensations, he was firm and resolute, even risking his own life. His courage and determination inspired other diplomats and encouraged similar rescues until the end of the war. Not for other reason, during June of 2003, he was proclaimed righteous among the nations. He became one of the few to receive such distinction from the Holocaust Museum in Israel, only granted to those who, under the Nazi repression, risked themselves for other people's good. Also, in December 2003, he was recognized by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Martyrs and Heroes Remembrance Authority, as a humanist hero during the Second World War. However, he is still very little known by the general public. Hence, I congratulate Fabio Koifman, who did a wonderful job in conducting a thorough research by interviewing, compiling, and rescuing important details on Souza Dantas' life. I extend my congratulations to the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation, which, by conveying and promoting values of courage and solidarity demonstrated by worldwide saviors, promotes harmony and comprehension among people. And especially at a time when mutual understanding and solidarity among people and world leaders are more than ever needed. The list of assets left by Ambassador Souza Dantas, found at his room in the Great Hotel of Paris, where he lived when he died in 1954, registers as the most valuable item a gold necklace with the medallion of Rio Branco, patron of Brazilian's diplomacy. It is a most joyful and honoring moment for me to share with all of you, distinguished friends and distinguished representatives of the Jewish, Brazilian, and diplomatic communities, the memories of a Brazilian diplomat hero and one of the most dignifying Brazilian biographies. I would like to take this opportunity to ask you something, or those who could be interested in doing something that I have in mind. Baruch Tenembaum wrote a brilliant book on Souza Dantas in Portuguese. Don't laugh. We are 186 million people in my country. it's important to have in Portuguese a biography of this man, since our heroes that we learn at school, people who fought in the War of Paraguay, or people who fought in different other wars, always wars. And we have somebody who, during a war, saved people. We need a different hero now. So it's very important to have a book published in Portuguese for our kids to know about this man. And the suggestion I would like to make here and to throw here to some organization, or who knows, a joint venture with different organizations, including us, is to have this book translated and published into English. This is something that is worthwhile doing. And we would accept very much suggestions about how to do it. Now, I would like to introduce Gustavo Jalife, Executive Director of the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation, to talk a little bit about our celebration today.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We appreciate the hospitality and cooperation of Ambassador Julio Gomez dos Santos, who didn't... Julio Gomez dos Santos, who didn't hesitate for a moment when we proposed to him to celebrate the life of Brazilian diplomat Luis Martins de Souza Dantas. I am pleased to introduce you Mr. Baruch Tenembaum, founder of the Wallenberg Foundation, Professor Fabio Koifman, renowned researcher and author of the magnificent Souza Dantas biography, and Mr. John Chrysostomo, the Wallenberg Foundation Vice President and Coordinator and Initiator of the Souza Mendes and Souza Dantas 50th Anniversary commemorations. We would also like to welcome the diplomatic delegations of the Holy See, Sweden, Argentina, Israel, Switzerland, Belgium, Bulgaria, Mexico, Czech Republic, China, El Salvador, and Angola. Moreover, many thanks to Varig Airlines and to Astro Café for their valuable cooperation in the making of this celebration. Among the dozens of letters of endorsements we received, allow me to read aloud excerpts of one signed by former New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. It says, Luis Martins de Souza Dantas was a tremendous leader of his era. He believed that religious persecution was intolerable and took the necessary actions to overcome it. At great personal risk, Souza Dantas granted diplomatic visas to hundreds of Jews during the Holocaust, saving countless lives from barbaric slaughter by the Nazis. I would like to applaud each of you for gathering tonight to celebrate his historic life. End of quote. We also thank the moving letters sent by Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Renato Martino, Cardinal Angelo Sodano, and United States Congressman Tom Lantos. Headed by Baruch Tenembaum, a group of scholars, journalists, and educators began more than a decade ago an exhaustive search of saviors from all around the world. As a matter of fact, that was the seed of what later developed as the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation, an NGO whose mission is not only to pay tribute to all those individuals who saved lives during the Holocaust, but also to promote the solidarity and the civic courage, values that animated the feats of these modern heroes. These two paramount values know neither geographical nor time boundaries and are as eternal as compassion and goodness. We can put them in practice as so many people did 60, 100, or 1,000 years ago. We only need to be determined to help our fellow human beings regardless of his or her religion, skin color, nationality, or political preference. This is precisely what the Wallenberg Foundation is doing in the frame of the educational program Wallenberg at School, carried out by specialized volunteers. The Wallenberg Foundation decided many years ago to begin a research work to deal with the saviors of Latin America. It was precisely at the very start of this endeavor when the name of Professor Fabio Koifman showed up, accompanied by his opus magnum, the biography of Souza Dantas, Quixote nas trevas, a Quixote in the darkness. As John Chrysostomo put it recently, we are commemorating in 2004 the year of the 50th anniversary of two great men, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, a Portuguese, the pioneer of the Holocaust rescue operation, and Luis Martins de Souza Dantas, two men that had the courage to follow their conscience over the misguided orders of their governments. Both men suffered and paid for it. End of quote. We would like here to highlight Brazil's stance that, unlike other countries, decides to look at history straight in the eye. For individuals and for nations as well, this is the only way of coming to terms with the past, no matter how atrocious it may have been. The Wallenberg Foundation, whose works span stretches from a memorial to the Holocaust victims installed in two Christian churches in Berlin and in Buenos Aires, to its efforts to solve the mystery of Raoul Wallenberg's fate. The imminent launching of a worldwide campaign was announced last Friday to a Russian ambassador, is firmly committed to find more Latin American saviors. In the case of Souza Dantas, our foundation has decided to propose to all the leading mayors of the world to name streets, gardens, or any other public spot of their cities after Souza Dantas. Moreover, and following an idea of Ambassador Gomez dos Santos, as he put it, Professor Koifman's book will be translated into English, we hope, very soon. This occasion is also a stimulus for our foundation. It encourages us all to remain in this very path and to make a public call to volunteers around the world that share with us the same values. We invite all men and women to contribute not with money, but with something far more precious, their wit, their passion, and their time. Now, let me introduce you Professor Fabio Koifman, born in Brazil on July the 4th, 1964, and graduated as a lawyer in the Rio de Janeiro Federal University. He achieved a master's degree in history thanks to a research on Souza Dantas' life and deeds. Today, Professor Koifman is Director of Research in the University Estácio da Sé in Rio de Janeiro. Besides his wonderful book, Quixote nas trevas, Professor Koifman is the coordinator of the book Presidentes do Brasil, a research study. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Fabio Koifman.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Júlio César Gomes dos Santos, Brazilian Consul General in New York, Mr. Baruch Tenembaum, a bankrupt newspaper, the Washington Post. The well-known publisher Catherine Graham, who directed the newspaper for many years, was Elise Souza Dantas' niece. He was at the time that Souza Dantas was the dean of the diplomatic court in Paris. Before the invasion of France by the German army, Elise left France and came to the United States. She would only meet Souza Dantas again in the middle of 1944. On the first days of June of 1940, the French government left Paris, and so did the foreign ambassadors, before the German troops captured the city. After some short periods in cities of Tours and Bordeaux, the French government moved its base to Vichy. In June 22, 1940, the French surrendered and the armistice was concluded 4 days later. In July 10th, a new government began, led by Marshal Pétain. According to the armistice, the French territory was divided into two parts. Paris and all the north part of the country occupied by Germans was administered by German military. The south part of the country was considered the free zone, administered by a collaborationist French government, but without ostensive Nazi troops present. Most of the countries has been practicing a diplomacy of severe restrictions to new entries for a long time. To the refugees, an access visa from Europe represented a matter of life or death. The diplomatic office still open, have very long lines at the doors, so it was extremely difficult to obtain a visa. In 1937, the new state dictatorship was established in Brazil. President Getúlio Vargas closed the Congress and ruled by means of law by decree, an authoritarian regime. Brazil was one of the few countries in the world that was still interested in attracting new immigrants despite the war. But for the Vargas government, this did not mean a policy of equal opportunity, as rules were introduced in order that only those considered the right people were allowed to enter. Brazil consuls were directed not to give visas to the most of the refugees. The exceptions were well defined. There are indications that Souza Dantas had already intervened in favor of refugees from Nazism before he had left Paris in June of 1940. However, I was only able to prove the ambassador's humanitarian help from that period onwards. And his help was not limited to Jews, but was given also to another groups that was being persecuted by the Nazis. The consulate were in charge to emit visas. An ambassador would only concede personally a visa under exceptional circumstances. In 1938, the Brazilian government, through a law by decree, established precise rules and a number of special criteria to concede visas to foreign people. The consulate authority that emitted the visa has to abide by extensive bureaucracy, such as declarations and all the kind of documents, demands that were almost impossible to the refugees fulfill. Thousands of people were displaced persons. Some were nuns and passport holders, others has no documents to travel at all, especially the ones coming from the countries that already occupied. The first record of irregular diplomatic visa issued by ambassador that I could spot appeared after the time of Souza Dantas left Paris. The visas issued by his own handwriting and thus constitute an evidence of Souza Dantas' humanitarian effort. On his way from Paris to Vichy, Souza Dantas passed by Perpignan and Bordeaux. There he started signing foreign passport to many with no consideration of origin, socio-economic condition, or ethnicity, without following the several Brazilian bureaucratic rules and restrictions. The majority of the about 500 diplomatic visas that I found were given to common people. They are dated from June 1904 to December 12, 1904, the date when Souza Dantas was officially prohibited to issue any kind of visas. However, according to some testimonies, many refugees came to ambassador in the first months of 1941 and received their visas for him. Those visas were stamped with dates previous to December 12, 1940. From August 1940 on, when the refugees started arriving in Brazil with visas given by Souza Dantas, a large number of complaints and protests from the Maritime Police and from the Immigration and Justice Cabinet arrived in the Foreign Affairs Office. They denounced the massive issue of irregular diplomatic visas given by Souza Dantas. During the year of 1941, the arriving refugees were an important preoccupation of the Brazilian government due to the political disputes in the high level of the government. From April 1941 onwards, the Justice Cabinet took control of visa permit to foreigners. After a number of incidents that had restrained the refugees from disembarking in Brazil harbor, lots of them carrying visas given by Souza Dantas, the ambassador was perceived as recalcitrant. Dictator Vargas became profoundly irritated not only because of the international pressure concerning the ships, but especially because of the visas to foreigners given by Souza Dantas that had already been unauthorized by Vargas himself. It became a personal matter to Vargas. On October 11, 1941, Vargas ordered an administrative process against the ambassador and started arrangements for his replacement. War-related problems prevent Vargas to find a quick solution. As Souza Dantas learned that he was going to be persecuted because of his action, he sent the following telegram to Rio de Janeiro. I remind you that due to the fact there was no consulate here, I was forced to take over the consulate functions because of the greatest catastrophe mankind has suffered up to our days in order to save human lives. I did what had to be done with the nobility of the Brazilian soul, moved by the most elementary Christian feelings. Almost all the visas were given only to facilitate the exit from France of those unhappy people waiting to commit suicide, and a few others that were given only to get to Brazil, not having caused any inconvenience to the country. The process started. However, it was weakened due to the rupture between Brazil and Germany. Brazil declared war on Germany and soon after that, in August 1942, Vargas gave order to file the lawsuit. From August of 1942 on, while waiting for his substitute, Souza Dantas keeps sending information about the refugee situation in France. The following telegram is very explicit. The Gestapo has been performing a true slaving and extermination of Jews. Their families are literally split up. The husbands with their heads shaved are taken to work in Silesia. The wives are sent to concentration camps in Poland. All of them are being sent to unknown localization, and probably they will never meet each other again. Their children, even the youngest ones, are violently pulled out from their mothers and confined to special asylum where they die. A few days later, he would complete his report. The foreign Jews, especially the ones from countries under Nazi occupation, who are in the non-occupied France, are being delivered to the Germans. Many are sent closed inside wagons shut with lead, more adequate to transportation of animals. Men and women take different ways. All of them are kept apart from the children who are left distressed. Many of these people commit suicide, and numerous painful scenes and taking place when their families were destroyed. This government alleges that these are Germans' demands, and they are concerned with the French Jewish people. They want to prevent them from being expelled too, so they do what they are asked to do by the Germans. And Souza Dantas continues, these are acts that violate international rights of protection and the most elementary principle of humanity. This is dishonoring France. It is easily understood by these telegrams of August 1942. Souza Dantas is in fact informing that the Holocaust is already well underway. In November 1942, Germany invaded the French zone. Until then, under the French collaborationist government, Vichy occupied all French territory. On the following day of the Brazilian embassy was invited by the group of Nazi officials. Souza Dantas interposed himself in the front of the German soldiers, shouting and protesting. The Nazi soldiers threatened him with their guns. But eventually everybody calmed down thanks to the consular Trajano Medeiros do Passo, who spoke fluent German. Souza Dantas and his subordinates were arrested and deported in January 1942 to Bad Godesberg in Germany. They remained confined in a hotel until the end of the March of 1944. The diplomats will only arrive in Brazil in May 1944. The Brazilian newspaper treated Souza Dantas as a hero due to the fact that Brazilian soldiers were fighting in the war. The news about Souza Dantas' resistance in the embassy in Vichy and the long time he remained detained. Brazil was still under Vargas' dictatorships, and the transformation of the persecuted diplomat into a hero did not please the dictator at all. Soon the news about paying homage to him disappear from the media. During the time of Vargas' rule, Souza Dantas was kept out of the spotlight. In October 1945, Vargas was thrown out of office and the ambassador good standing remeasured, thanks for the political influence of his former colleagues, diplomats. He was already retired when he was invited by the Foreign Affairs Minister to head the Brazilian delegation in the first part of the United Nations General Assembly in London, between January the 10th and February 14, 1946. There he was called the Dean of World Diplomatic Corps. On January 14, Souza Dantas was the second speaker to address the General Assembly, right after James Francis Barnes, the American Secretary of State. Between 1951 to his death in 1954, Vargas was president of Brazil again, as a result of free election this time. Souza Dantas lived his last years in Paris and died in April 1954, just a few days after the Portuguese Aristides de Souza Mendes. A series of political events, especially those related to so-called Vargas shares, were determined to cause the silence around Souza Dantas' name after his death. Any reference to Souza Dantas was always avoided by those who looked after the memory and legacy of President Vargas. Souza Dantas never had any children. After his death, there was no voice left to remember his name. After almost 50 years of oblivion, I see with joy, emotion, and satisfaction a homage like this taking place. I see with joy the name of Souza Dantas was a reference to exemplary humanitarian behavior. It's fitting that his name be associated with great humanitarians such Raoul Wallenberg and Aristides Souza Mendes. I have no doubts that this will be his greatest wish and the best homage that someone could pay to him. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Wallenberg Foundation has decided to distinguish this Consulate General and Professor Koifman with the Luis Martins de Souza Dantas 2004 award. So I invite Mr. Baruch Tenembaum, recently distinguished by the King of Sweden with the Royal Order of the Polar Star, to present the award to the Brazilian Consul, Ambassador Julio Gomes dos Santos, for the sincere commitment of this delegation to honor Souza Dantas and to broaden his legacy throughout today's diplomatic delegations. Moreover, Mr. Tenembaum will also present to the Council an official letter addressed to President of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, inviting the head of state to join the honorary board of the Wallenberg Foundation that counts today with more than 60 heads of state and more than 50 Nobel Prize winners. Mr. Tenembaum. And now I call on Mr. John Chrysostomo to present the award to Professor Fabio Koifman for his boundless commitment to spreading Luis Martins de Souza Dantas' values of dialogue and understanding, as well as for revitalizing the figure of the Brazilian diplomat around the world. Please, John. Now to close the ceremony, Julio will talk.
Well, when I had the first visit of Baruch last week, at the end of the week, we had a chat, a conversation about this ceremony, and Baruch Koifman had not arrived yet. And when we were at the elevator, I told him, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to dedicate the big hall we have here to Souza Dantas and unveil his picture. So this will be Sala Embaixador Souza Dantas. I have already ordered the producing of the letters that will be in that hall, and the picture will be there, and this will be Souza Dantas' room forever. But before I unveil his picture, which actually is not a very good picture, we'll have another one, I hope, I would like to make a small clarification. In spite of Vargas' dictatorship at that time, none of the people who got the visa from Souza Dantas was prevented to enter in Brazil. There was no persecution of any sort of minorities in Brazil at that time, the same way as has never been during all our existence. There has never been a state policy against minorities in Brazil, most of the country. And I wouldn't like that the impression would be given here that Vargas was an evil man. He was one of the greatest Brazilian statesmen we had. And I can say for sure that our history, modern history, is divided between two periods, before and after Vargas. So he was elected by the majority of the Brazilian people in 1951, he died in 1954. He committed these scenes that Baruch Tenembaum so well described when he read Souza Dantas' biography. But I wouldn't like to have him vilified here when we are making this homage to a great man like Souza Dantas. Now, please, Baruch, if you help me to unveil Mr. Souza Dantas' picture. Okay. Well, thank you very much to all of you for coming and joining us in this celebration that is so dear.